controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are Ace Up Science here to make things make sense.
So, Mitchell, Ryan Moffat, you would live forever. Is this true, or are you trolling me?
I would choose to live forever. Yes, I know this is what prompted us to want to do this episode because we were chatting about this before.
You're serious.
Obviously, I'm not saying there aren't like pitfalls or downfalls. You know, I love Lord of the Rings, and they actually talk about this. They actually capture this moment because Arwen can live forever, and she's Liv Tyler. Is that her name? Liv Taylor.
Liv Tyler, Steve Tyler's daughter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she can live forever and is choosing to marry a mortal man. And her dad's like, you're going to be depressed when everyone you know here, if you don't go to these beautiful undying lands, then you're going to have everyone you know die. And you're going to be so lonely and you're just going to linger.
Wait, why
here.
can't you go to the lands with him?
It's like she has to choose. Are you staying here for this man or are you coming to heaven with us?
This is why the Lord of the Rings movies, in my opinion, are not that good. Because
that's mean.
How the hell was that explained? I watched that.
You know what Greg says? He says he watched it. You know what he did? Talked on phone.
No, I mean, you gotta laugh.
I was making, there's nothing wrong
really
laughing,
funny things.
but sometimes an important
I was never on my phone.
Okay, you weren't on your phone.
Never say that. That was not true.
I had friends over for Lord of the Rings.
They speak in weird language.
Okay, but how come I understand it?
You Wikipedia'd it when you were a kid.
No, I didn't. They fully explain it. There's a whole montage of him. He lies to her. He doesn't tell her. She starts going to the Undying Lands, and then he's like, he sees the future. I'm sorry, we're going to talk about living forever science soon.
Like, see, Mitch, you're already lost me. Like, you just tried to explain it to me.
Okay. I was cutting back to let you know more. Her father can see the future. He tells her.
I didn't know that.
He's a magical elf, okay? He's been alive for like thousands of years. He's like, I've seen your future. It's sad. He dies eventually. You are here forever, depressed. Please come with me to go to heaven, basically.
What
it's
does
not
she
heaven.
do?
She starts going, and then she has a vision of their kid. And she's like, comes back. She's like, you told me there'd only be sadness and pain, but there's a life. And then she stays because she's like, I'm choosing to like love and then have children. And
so she's just going to live forever. Her kid's going to die. Her husband's going to die.
Yeah. And
so
that's
maybe
what I'm saying.
He was like, you didn't
that.
really think this one through. Yeah, you're going to enjoy your kid while the kid's alive, but then your kid's going to die.
Whatever.
Which brings me back to living forever.
Okay, let's actually talk
about...
That's
outliving your kid. That's so hard.
I mean... Yes, obviously there is a difference if no one else can live forever. Like that's
kind of what I think. But when I think of the philosophical question of living forever, it's
I'm not so hardcore one way. If I actually had to make the choice, it would be to live a long time, but maybe not forever, because I do think the inevitability of death is what creates the preciousness of life. And if you knew you couldn't die or were living forever, like that would be very consequential in the way life feels.
And you would just like have such a skewed outlook of everything.
Yeah.
Right?
And
like
I'm not saying that's not true. And I obviously can't actually face that because this will never happen.
Well, you know, but you are like once we were asked this in front of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I remember his reaction to you was so intense because I was like, I think he was really fascinated by your answer.
Because I think...
So like it is a hot, like a pretty hot take to say like
I don't think it's I think it's I don't know how to say this. Like it feels like there's potentially nothing, absolutely zero after this. So it's like, why would you choose to let go of the only thing you have, which is living? That's kind of where I come from.
It's kind of like, is that the only thing you have?
That's the question. And I would say obviously people who believe in an afterlife, it'd be a much easier decision for them to say, like if I believed in an afterlife, I would be like, oh well, I'm happy to go to heaven.
Wait, do people who believe in an afterlife think they're living forever?
No, they
kind of.
Oh yes, right. Like their soul lives forever. Yeah
Right. How does that work? Like when did heaven stop being like the cream cheese Philadelphia lady?
When did it stop being?
Well, it feels like I don't know.
I
feel
like your vision of what it always was.
No, like isn't it like you're in a cloud? You're like going to like the grocery store, but it's like a cloud grocery store, and you're just like living life, but it's heaven. Is that like kind of not
literally crazy that people believe that?
But then I'm like, is that actually what, when you said soul and all those things? I'm like, oh yeah, it's more deep than that. It's not like
different for everyone. I think some people believe that literally, and I think some people believe in a different way that they might just be at peace, like whether or not they believe they're conscious, I don't know.
Yeah.
But if you're conscious, are you just floating around, or are you like in a town that's in the clouds?
Yeah, no, I know. Being in a town in the clouds, I'm like, sign me up.
Well, I'll bring up a little fact. So there are some animals that seemingly can live forever. There are some that just live for a really long time. So, there's like sharks and like eels,
whales,
and stuff
right whales
that don't get cancer or whatever, like their cells develop in a different way. But Hydra vulgaris has evolved, which is kind of like a jellyfish. Yeah, it probably is. Has evolved to defy senescence, which is like cells dying, basically. They obviously die in the wild, like things eat them, but in labs, they seemingly live forever.
Wow.
And it's because they're primarily made up of stem cells, so they can constantly divide and make new cells, and then their old cells are discarded.
There are some longevity bros who are studying that mofo.
For sure. And that's the only, so like and I know we're going to do an Alan Watts podcast eventually, but he has a lot of really interesting things on, a lot of people are scared of death. And I think for him, he's like, you cannot have life without death. Like it has not that it just has no meaning. It's like they are one and the same. Like life doesn't exist without death, and you need that to like be able to appreciate it.
I really need to do mushrooms again. Like I feel because I really am like
listen to Alan Watts. It's
I will, and I will listen to Alan Watts on mushrooms. But I'm like, it's like you do need to reset your brain with mushrooms every once in a while, because I'm right now being like, oh God, I want to live forever. But it's like, you eat some mushrooms, you have an ego death, and then you're like, no, I do want to die. Like, it's beautiful.
It can be beautiful, and I think I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but when
I don't know why I just went there. I just realized today I was like, I want to do mushrooms. Go.
I was going to say, humans do have stem cells as well. They can repair, certain parts of our bodies can repair and generate almost like indefinitely. You have the liver, which people often know. It's like if it's damaged, it actually can regrow and go back to
cancer of the liver. That's a rare one.
But like very few things in the body are made like permanently of stem cells. And because humans have cells that need to do more than just divide, like we basically, our cells commit to a function. And if they have to lose their ability to like continuously divide in order to be functional.
Because the metaphor for life, like that's like why.
So what is the metaphor? What?
Like it's like our cells are designed like in order to work properly during life, they have to die. Does that make sense?
I suppose.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
but then
it's
there is this creature, this sort of like jellyfish
maybe that
doesn't. So like maybe it's got it right.
That one's fine. That one's allowed to. It's natural.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's natural for us to live forever, but I would. Okay, would you extend your life by 100 years?
100 years.
And also, this is always considering that you're healthy, able to move, able to think. Like,
honestly, no.
If you could be this body for an extra 100 years.
No, because
That's
so the thing that I think about is like my kids. Like I just don't want to watch my kids die.
That might happen even if you.
I know that would be so, and I will deal with that then. I'm saying I don't want to guarantee that. I don't want to be around without like my family and friends. Like, I just think it would be so lonely that I'd rather not. And I do think the world's going to get so much worse.
Oh, I mean,
so
those
I'm
are
just like,
considerations,
that's my pessimistic outlook on like the future of humanity, which is like maybe not fair. But I'm kind of like thinking of my life, and I'm like, it's a good little margin for like, how bad things are going to get. And
I just think you've just fallen into the trap of what you know, though. Because why would
God.
What are you thinking you're going to live to, like 80 something? Is that what you predict?
Like, I hope.
So then it's like, then you just have a structure around what you think life is
Alan
that you
Watts
aren't able to break out of it.
I'm trying to like
but like if it was natural for humans to live to 150, then you would probably be like,
that'd be great, because then I would assume my lifespan and my kids' lifespan and everything would be right now it's designed in a way.
So it's not about your life, it's about the suffering that comes from seeing people around you.
Yeah.
die.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. 1000%. It's like if I get an extra 100 years and no one else does, I'm like that.
What if everyone does? If everyone does, you
yes. Oh my God. If all of a sudden everything gets like prolonged, yes. The answer is yes.
So if everything gets prolonged to forever?
If everyone starts to live forever.
And not.
Wait, what do you mean? And no one gives birth ever again?
No. Not that, but
because
just like
then there's no space for everyone.
No, let's just say we're like colonizing other planets.
So now we're colonizers.
No, I know that is bad. That's a bad thing, but like it's probably gonna happen.
I'm just saying, colonization comes with the need for this to happen. We're colonizing other planets.
Like we have space. No one's
forever.
Like we're not like so overcrowded on Earth or something. Are you gonna do it? Or everyone has the choice to have the pill.
Harder time. Everyone has the choice. That's also really scary.
Okay,
that's an interesting one. If everyone has the choice, because it's like,
okay, fine.
No,
Scrap
I would want everyone to be forced to live forever, and then I could do it. Maybe I couldn't do it if there was a choice, because
I would do it.
Wait, but then you can't get hit by a.
You can still get hit by a bus.
And no one can get hit by a bus.
Okay, fine. No one can get hit by a bus.
Okay, but I don't think that is the thought experiment, right? Like,
well, it's the one this is my thought experiment.
Sorry, but I'm like, the idea of living forever, I feel like it's something like people talk about all the time. It's been brought up like in science classes and stuff. I feel like the idea is not that everyone lives forever. It's that you individually get to live forever, like a vampire in Twilight.
Yes, okay, I understand that would be very lonely. That would be very challenging. And that's not like where my brain goes to when I'm first thinking about it.
It goes to like everyone gets to.
Yeah, and just like it more goes to, well, what's the point of dying on purpose?
I thought that it was like what Alan Watts said. It's like the most beautiful thing. You've
guess,
done your time. Yeah. You've passed
but that,
on.
I think that's a coping mechanism. Like, I agree, and I think it's a beautiful way to think about it because we will die.
Yeah.
But if we didn't have to, I don't think that has to.
Maybe that's.
I don't think that has to be true.
Maybe that's why people say it, because they know like you are gonna die, like regardless of if you say yes or no. And maybe people,
it's an easier way to say, like,
they're trying to figure out their own philosophy.
Oh, that's interesting. There's like a study that has nothing to do with death, but has to do with people's choices and how when you are given, like, it's like when people buy art and then they're later told they can like buy another one. How did this study go? It's like, you can choose between these art pieces.
Yeah.
You buy one, and they're actually like, that was not available. We're going to give you this one.
Yeah.
And then later they let you have the option to switch or something.
Switch back,
people are always less happy when they know they can switch.
Huh.
And I'm just thinking about death, like, and the way maybe this is not related at all. I don't know how I was trying to connect that in my brain, but yeah, people justify when you don't have a choice. You justify what happened, and you make it right. So people know they're going to die. And I think as a result, it's actually very comforting to just say, that's what I want.
Okay, well, get into the science, because sometimes I think you're someone who's like, there's a way where we won't maybe one day not die. And I'm like, that's impossible.
Okay.
We disagree.
You want me to just talk about some? I just wrote down a handful of different things from a book I loved called Lifespan.
But are we going to talk at all about the lack fee thing? You did a video on that. Or but that's separate. That's
I haven't like released it yet.
Sorry, but I'm like, that's
How did you know about that?
I
told you?
sent you the article. It was my idea.
You sent me the lack fee thing?
I hate you so much. You're lying here, man.
Is that when it started?
Mitch like has this memory thing, and he does this thing where he forgets things, and it's like when it's these moments, I'm like, you're lying to me. It was my idea of a video, and then I sent you all the research because I was like, this would be a great idea.
So
and then you took it.
That's not entirely true. I'll explain more to you off the pod. But
no, sorry, but my point is like I've read those articles. Like I'm so curious about it, and
so the lack fee was the new one. Yes. So this was related to exercise in a pill, essentially.
Is it not related to longevity though, in the sense that
no, but I mean, obviously exercise is tied to longevity.
Yeah.
Like being physically healthy for a longer period of time, like working out or being able to have a pill that provides the benefits of working out, could potentially make you live longer.
Okay.
You know, it's because you're like your body's like being kept in a different condition and like less likely to have like heart attack, stroke, cancer, those kinds of things.
Because it's pitched in like longevity bro circles as the lack fee is like maybe going to be one of the things to help you live
so
longer.
lack fee, just to clarify, is like an amino acid that they realized it's basically like if you exercise and immediately after they test you, they're like this compound, which is like a form of lactate, the stuff that like makes you feel burning when you're exercising. This is like in a really high concentration, and then they've realized like this component is actually providing a lot of the benefits of exercise, and if we can synthesize it in such a way and just give it to people, then they don't have to exercise to get that benefit.
That's interesting.
And I think that's really cool, and you're right, it's like linked to longevity, but not entirely. So because so much of aging and dying is just the way our cells like develop.
Yeah.
You know, there's science on telomeres and how every time your cell divides, these little caps on the end of your DNA get shorter and shorter and shorter. So cells only have a maximum capacity to divide up to a certain point.
Yeah.
And then there's like some science on like things that actually slow the shortening of telomeres or lengthen them.
So what are those?
I don't have that handy right now, to be honest.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about.
No, I mean, I just like in general, like this field of science is like so huge, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't just mean in like how much is being studied. I mean, and like how much there is to know.
And also how much is being blown out of proportion and how much is also really vague.
Yeah. And we have talked about like cold showers and stuff like that. And there is some evidence for like cold exposures to increase life. So one of the coolest thing I thought from this book, again, in mice. Yeah. So the book's called Lifespan. I think his name is, what's his name?
Mitch Moffat.
Yeah, I'm like, Mitch Moffat read it. No, I'll get it'll come to me. David St. Clair, I think that's his name.
Wow.
And what was I going to say? I had something very specific I was going to say.
We were talking about...
Oh, okay. Actually, a lot of it, a chapter that I learned the most from, and hopefully we've shared this already, is like about hormesis. Like this idea that when you stress your body
horny... No, I'm kidding.
When you stress your body out in certain ways, it can be good. Exercise being the quintessential example. And the sort of like biology behind it is it actually triggers a bunch of events in your body. So, like longevity genes, things that then go and like clean up cells and like help minimize deletions in your genes, and like the things that often lead to aging. When you're pushing through these things, you basically like wake up a bunch of like, it's like epigenetics, right? Like
you're picturing exercise.
But
what are other stressors?
Other stressors, cold and hot. They have some more evidence for cold than they do for hot, but like putting your body in cold situations on a short term, obviously cold can be really dangerous, can trigger those same longevity genes. Intermittent fasting is a huge one. That's why it's become so popular.
I know. When I was reading that like LACV stuff, it was like, wow, intermittent fasting, the science is like pretty... It is. It's the science isn't as like, it's not...
Right. It's not going to just like make you live forever.
Yeah. And it's not even like guaranteed, but like the science is leaning towards like it's leaning towards fasting for like 16 hours a day is like going to...
And even so, they've done like kind of mass studies on cultures that naturally calorie restrict, whether that's because of like religious beliefs or cultural practices. This doesn't mean they're doing it all year round necessarily, but those cultures are generally healthier and have longer lifespans.
For sure. And also like move just in general movement. Like whenever they study the people who like live past 100, although that living past 100 thing, so genetic.
Oh, totally.
I know. I was like, when I was like, like when I was reading about living forever, it was like so much of those, what are the centenarians or whatever?
Yeah.
Sorry. The reason I'm giving an eye roll is because when you read about this stuff, you realize there's so many Silicon Valley dudes that are like obsessed with this from like a capitalist
like
perspective.
All that, yeah.
But it's like so many of the people, it's genetics. When they study centenarians, their kids are centenarians and their kids. It's like you realize there's like genetics being passed through that you can't just like buy. But on top of that, it was like a lot of places. Obviously, the Mediterranean diet is one of them, but it's just places where the environment was that they moved around, they walked. They literally like didn't have cars. They like had to grocery shop. And,
totally.
Like, just honestly, a lot of like small villages where it's like you just have to walk.
Move. Yeah. No, obviously movement is so important.
Even like standing up.
That's why I do have a video coming out about an exercise pill, because it's obviously just so fascinating. And not that it's trying to encourage people not to move, but we live in a world that's becoming increasingly more stagnant.
Yeah.
And also there's lots of legitimate reasons why people can't exercise. They're busy. It's an affluence issue.
Yeah.
It could also be like related to people who are recovering from surgeries. Are there pills that we can give that mimic exercise when you are elderly because you're losing muscle mass and bone density? So there's lots of like
so annoyed about the intermittent fasting thing because I get migraines. Listen to our migraine app, or migraine if you're British.
Migraine.
Great episode in the sense that it helped me so much with my migraines and understanding them. And it's like I need to keep consistency and I need to keep glucose levels.
Yeah.
Like
it might be interesting for you. I don't know how you would get there, but I think everyone's body has their own
like threshold
system. But I think most bodies are able to adapt over time. So I think the problem
just
is
go through a bunch of migraines as I fast.
No, that's what you don't want to do. But I'm saying like I bet you could eventually create a system where you're bit by bit eating a little later to not trigger a migraine, and like maybe one day your body will be like, oh, I'm able to go this long without food.
It was crazy because the migraine episode is all about consistency, and we talked about caffeine. I always wake up and have a coffee, and I have one at like 9 a.m. I'm like, Drake, I'm like, sorry, I just admit that I get up at around 9. And then around like 1 p.m. the other day, slept in, had to be somewhere. I didn't have a coffee till 11, and at 10:45, I'm not kidding, grabbing the coffee, I start getting the migraine glow. It was like oh my God, I was biking, I was panicking, I was pushing it, and it happened. It was like, this is the caffeine thing. Like it's really interesting how
tied to
once I figured out, again, listen to the migraine episode, how they worked. And I was thinking about fasting because like with 4 o'clock comes and I haven't had dinner's coming late, it's like I always have like a granola bar because I'm like, I don't want
to like risk
my glucose levels like fluctuating. But it's like, that's actually when they talk about it, a lot of it is like, you know, just spacing out your meals and not snacking and stuff like that. And it's like, oh God.
I mean, it would be interesting to see what would happen if you experimented slowly but surely to change, because it's kind of like, it's like going to another time zone, and it takes a long time for your body to adjust, right?
And I'm never going to do that.
But if you like slowly adjusted to a new night schedule, you don't need to. But
I'm making this as the excuse why I can't intermittent fast. Like I can't intermittent fast because I don't want to, because I'm like, that sounds like the worst thing ever. I would just love food. Who cares?
A really cool way it was described to me. This is going back to hormesis, so that like small stress, because obviously large stress damages cells and can actually do damage to your body. But it was like a law of aging is related to DNA repair, genes that are like being distracted. So when there isn't DNA damage in your body, they can focus on like more important things basically. But as you age, your body has like more mutations, more things that this DNA damage like repair system is like looking after. And as a result, it can't focus on like as concretely.
So what's the stress doing? It's helping.
The stress is like making it focus on other parts of you. Yeah. It also is like triggering certain hormones. Like again, I debated how like deep to get into this. The book is so fascinating and it's like so in depth, and it's like every chapter is about a different thing that kind of happens. And so there's so many different hormones and drugs that they're testing, realizing like, oh, this mimics that.
Doesn't testosterone just like kill you?
Well, yeah. Like it is
like literally
why men live like shorter.
For
than
some reason,
women.
like people inject themselves with it to get muscles. Like,
yeah,
see you later,
whatever.
bro.
But you also brought up the genetic thing, which I find interesting because epigenetics, you know, I feel like when we were first in biology, there's this conversation about like evolution and how genes get passed down, and how there was like Lamarckian theories that got really rejected about like how if your parents act a certain way or in certain environments, that shouldn't actually affect you.
Or like the metaphor that I would like that teachers would use, and I remember when I was teaching, it was like the giraffe. Like the giraffe neck got longer, not because the giraffe like pushed and stretched its neck.
Yeah.
It was.
But this is not to say like Lamarckian evolution is like right, but over time there is a huge part of your genome that is there, but the epigenetics and the environment, your environment triggers it, right? And they have realized in studies, even parents, so in studies on mice, I should say, they can give parents both like fatty diets, high calorie diets, whatever, and also then let some exercise and some don't. And the parents that exercise end up having kids or baby mice that are better at processing their diets. So like even if they don't exercise. So it is like possible to transfer down those kind of like behavioral epigenetic factors.
Yeah, epigenetics is kind of Lamarckian. That's interesting.
Yeah, it kind of is. But you're right. It's not like, oh, if I scratch my nails down, the next generation's going to have filed nails.
Yeah, you know? Or it's like that's just not how evolution works on like small scales in general.
Yeah, but in terms of aging, this book at least, and this expert in the field says studies put genetic influence of aging at around 10 to 25%. Meaning like
that's how you sell your book, babe.
Well, meaning that your DNA isn't like all binding.
No, I'm just laughing because it's like, you know, it's like it would be shitty if you were trying to write this book and be like, and it's genetic.
Well, no, but there's so many studies on twins being like, if you take identical twins and one's a smoker and one is not, they will age at different rates, right? And I think that's like intuitively true to most people, and a nice example of showing, you know, that might be an extreme example, but there's lots of little factors that can impact how fast you age, the way that changes your body and the way you look. And then
hormesis is interesting. It's like that. It's just everything's a bell curve vibes. You know what I mean? It's like too much stress, bad. Too little stress. I was just like thinking, I was reading about time management, and they found that, you know, if you're like a parent and you have a really high intensity job and you feel like you don't have a lot of time, you feel sad. But then people who have lives, who are like entrepreneurs who have all the time in the world, also feel sad because they don't have any drive. They have there's no boss telling them what to do. Or like, it's like you need to be in the middle. It's like that reminds me of like with hormesis. It's kind of like okay. So now I'm gonna explain is like why all this research might be really bad. And it's just a like sociology like essay. But what they were saying, it's like about justice. Sure. And it's saying essentially the thesis is that as Western countries continue to do this research, they're just ignoring the fact that so many poor people are dying so young, and there's simple interventions that could be used to prolong the life of people currently
who are
on
dying
this planet who
young.
are dying at the age of 40.
Yeah,
and I was like, that's
totally
interesting.
fair.
Yeah, like,
but okay, I'll let you speak more on it. But I just want to like, I'm not going to play devil's advocate in a bad way. But all I mean is, it a little bit sounds like me when it was like an expansion into like resources for NASA. That's like billions of dollars, and people are like, why aren't we spending that here? But not really, like research is interconnected, and just because there's scientists studying the lifespan past 80 doesn't mean there aren't and should be money also going to those studying interventions to make people live longer who are dying at 40. They don't have to cancel each other out.
No, they don't,
can both
but it
exist.
can be interesting to think of why people are so interested in that for themselves.
Fair. Then when
like,
there's so many people who don't have the privilege.
It's a privilege
That's
check.
fair. Yeah.
So essentially, they came down with 3 reasons why they think this type of research could like be more menacing than we realize. You're right. Of course, this can lead to breakthroughs in so many different types of medicine. That's what I mean. This is like a sociology essay about like pretty much like the structures of the world, like being unfair and not really like working. Because even breakthroughs in medicine in the West is for a subset of people. And in many ways, people who can afford it.
Yeah.
Like, I was just hearing about the new Alzheimer's drug. Like, it's not even that effective. And in America, it's $58,000 a year.
To have an Alzheimer's drug?
It's a drug that, in some pretty early trials, it, like, decreases the, like, rate of Alzheimer's happening in people. But that expense was like, what? That's crazy.
Who can have this?
These breakthroughs in science, like, don't trickle down to something that if you're not loaded you can't afford, if it's like small scale.
Do they I don't know, like we'll see in the future.
That's
like
true.
Obviously, like any technology when it first is available and not widespread is expensive. I'm not justifying, like I totally hear your point that sometimes is only driven by capital and by money, and that's the only reason those drugs are being studied in the first place, because they're like, we can make a shit ton of money. Where you're saying like, there's like other simple solutions that can't make as much money but could actually save way more people. Or
they
give a better quality of life.
They could probably maybe even make more money now. It's just that there is like maybe not as much interest. Actually, I don't really
I think
know
where
how
there's
that
money
works.
to be made, there's interest.
No, that's true.
It's just like interventions like sanitation, you know what I mean? And like
that's
proper
literally
hygiene.
one of them. They're like literally low tech things that could be done. Essentially, just like many of the countries in south of the Sahara in Africa, the life expectancy is 40, whereas the average lifespan in rich and developed countries is 70 to 80 years. So like ethically spending time figuring out how to make people in those countries live longer, they think it's just going to continue to fragment society. That like they were like, if they were like bird's eye, like if an alien came and looked at the world, they'd be like,
it's such
this
inequality.
is a fragmented society. And like if immortality or increased life expectancy is good, it is doubtful ethics. Okay, wait. It's like, is that worth doing if we can't provide for all?
Totally, yeah.
And then it's like, as a variation, like they think that maybe...
By totally, I meant just like I'm agreeing with you.
Like
I'm not saying it's worth doing.
No, like that life extension technology is like really interesting to think about when we know the answers to make certain parts of the population be able to live as long, but they're not being done and there's not much interest in them. Then the living forever one and living longer, there was this like, they called it relational dimension, that like living longer is valuable only if it results in living longer in meaningful relations.
Or like quality of life.
And that quality of time outweighs quantity of time. The real ethical challenge for aging societies, therefore, should be how to improve the conditions for life as a community, not stop the aging process.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
I thought was also interesting. And then the last thing was that is like about the meaning of life. Like there's always a notion that human beings miss the essence of life by focusing on the preservation of their ego. Whereas like it's been found that like literally like living modestly and the ability to give priority and like helping other people to flourish is what makes people feel happy and meaningful. So it's kind of like, it was just like really interesting way of being like, if you're looking at this research for the wrong reasons, you might actually not be even living a fulfilling life.
Totally.
Constantly trying to like bring longevity to your own when really like, you know, life is, you're going to die. And like, what is, it was really interesting because I'm like, yeah, like you wouldn't necessarily see the menacing aspects of this from like a like happiness perspective.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's like you're actually just trying to prolong like dates in your life.
Right, which could be meaningless.
Whilst ignoring maybe in fact it could be
it.
like ostracizing you from the community because you're trying to live longer than essentially like everyone else. Yeah. It was interesting. It was super interesting, and I agree. Like it's not like you should stop the research, but it's like it's a check of the research of like what is the point of this. And
the hardest part is that, you know, and maybe this is like a little bit of a naive view, but in my mind, I'm like, you know, the shitty part is the sort of like these companies are trying to capitalize on drugs and money and whatever. But then you think on my inside, I'm like, but I feel that most of the scientists doing the work probably care and have noble hopes for like why these drugs can also be useful in other spaces. Like with the exercise video I'm doing, realizing that, I don't know, like it doesn't just have to be, it's not about being the most jacked. Like they're not, it's like we live in a world where there is a lot of problems, and it could look bad to be developing an exercise drug, but at the same time that could end up helping a lot of people in spaces.
Totally.
And that research opens doors and to discover a lot of other things about how the human body works.
I totally agree.
Studying why cells die and how we can stop them doesn't only mean we're understanding how to live longer. It can actually mean we're understanding the biology of like how cancer. To take care of our cells and body. I totally hear you and agree that like we should be focusing on the quality of life, and especially the people in this world that don't have the privilege to live like to 80 and beyond, because for whatever variety of reasons, like that is a huge injustice.
Well, I think also it's just, I think that you could say the scientists have the best intention, but it's one of those funny things about science where it's like it's just a very closed off group from society, and a lot of it is like scientific breakthroughs are fascinating, they're exciting, they get you money, they get you fame, they get you
everyone
like,
falls
new
into the traps
information is always going to be valuable in science. And I think that one thing that a lot of scientists lack, and I see this just from experience with like our peers and stuff, is the understanding of like culture and society, and like that is just something
that's fair,
that is so interesting because science and society are like, they're literally in tandem. They're designed the same way. That science impacts society so much. In fact, like most of society is based around science, that sometimes it's okay. I always talk about Nature magazine, but it's like, I'll use an example. You literally read it and you start with opinions from people about society. They're scientists, but they're just like giving their opinion. It's very heady. Then you get into the headlines where they're trying to link really intense science to society, like COVID, like what has it done to like literally like shipping vessels and all these things, and climate change. And you're like, literally like that Amazon thing. Let's look at these really intense research, and then let's link it to indigenous people. And then at the end, you get the actual like science articles that are in no way
connected.
Like at the very end of the discussion, they go, it's really important that we think about this because maybe it'll do this. Right. And you realize it's like, okay, there are so many scientists just doing the end part of nature that are so in the weeds and they're so important. But, and it's almost kind of what our job
social
is.
Scientists
like,
on the outside.
The people like on that periphery in some ways are so much more valuable, but they're not necessarily considered as legit in the science world.
Right.
And they're not, the scientific community isn't designed to reward those people. Like it's not designed to reward people to be like, we actually need justice over a breakthrough.
Right.
Like we have the means to help people live longer currently on the planet. We're not doing it because of capitalism. Like you're a scientist, you might be like, what? And then you're like, well, that's an economics issue. That's not my issue. Like it's just interesting. And it's also very confusing, but I just think science is so amazing and so flawed in so many ways.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, on obviously the world is complex. Like I think if you were to ask most people, at least most good people, and pose that question to them, we would hopefully all be saying, yes, we should putting all the resources towards helping the people that actually don't have the same opportunities versus like expanding my life by 2 years in my 80s.
And it's so sad. Like there all these like plans, you know, for vaccination against diseases, all this money that has been like promised. I was just reading recently about how under the target of money that was supposed to be given to the world for helping with these diseases that we can eradicate, like because of COVID and many other things, it's just all fallen short. Like the Western wealthy countries have become economically a little bit more greedy as the world becomes more quote unquote unstable, which is like not whether it is or isn't. I don't understand economically. All I know from what I've just recently read is that the amount of money that was supposed to be given in 2022, like to this point, is not. It's like $1.8 billion under what, like, you know, back in 2018, a bunch of countries signed to give.
Right.
And it kind of makes you wonder, like, okay, like that money, like we probably could give that money. You know what I mean? Like there has to be a reason why we're not. And I don't think the reason why we're not is rooted in like anything other than greed.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So what do we do? Like kick out all the politicians?
No, I don't know. It's just I don't know what the solution to any of this.
Yeah.
is.
So if anyone like has the solution to the world's problems,
it's so complex, and yeah, I think that is the bad part, because I think even I go into a mode of being like, but hopefully it's, you know, slowly chugging forward, and hopefully like I you know, we always talk about how
you're
I'm
more
optimistic for the future. I'm pessimistic in the now.
And I'm optimistic in the now and pessimistic for the future.
Yeah, and I'm always like, okay, but there, you know, if we look over history, like there is better access to sanitation and hygiene and water access. Like, of course, like, yes, there are still such major problems, but there are major initiatives all around the world trying to make a difference. But and hopefully that continues, and hopefully these breakthroughs that might seem a little self-indulgent can trickle into other spaces. And we have seen that, right? Like even, and I know this is like
vaccines.
Totally. And research in fields do cross-contaminate in a good way. Like sometimes something that was for NASA in space is now literally on Earth, giving people access to the internet. You know what I mean?
Or water, literally water purification.
So that's my hope, is that continues, and that there are enough good people out there to like continue doing those good things. I think from the macro view, it's actually way too overwhelming, that it is like the thing to do is to just be a human in your local community or whatever that is, whether it's your city, your country, your just like your neighborhood, and like
vote.
How can you vote for sure, but how can you actually just do something that can help people in some way or coordinate around something that you care about?
Have you seen, I saw like, we're gonna end here, but it was just like a clip from John Earl and Kate Bryant's special where like it ends and it's just like a quote of her being like, I think that self-care is the key to all the world's problems.
As a